Most gardeners are addicted to fertilizer because they've quietly destroyed the soil systems that make fertilizer almost unnecessary. Every season, I see people pouring stronger feeds, chasing greener leaves, and wondering why yields stall, flavor drops, and plants still stress under heat or drought. That's not a nutrient problem. That's a soil architecture problem. And the fix isn't new at all. It's over 2,000 years old, and it makes modern fertilizer look embarrassingly weak. Before we go any further, if you grow food seriously and want results that hold up across seasons, subscribe to the Farm Logic channel. This channel exists for gardeners who are done chasing products and want systems that actually work in beds, soil, and hydro setups. What I'm sharing here isn't theory. I've tested it, broken it, fixed it, and watched it outperform expensive inputs again and again. Why modern fertilizer feels powerful but keeps failing long-term. Modern fertilizer works fast because it bypasses biology. You add soluble nutrients, plants respond, and everyone feels successful. The problem shows up later. Roots stay shallow, soil collapses, microbes get starved or killed off by salt buildup. Water drains too fast or not at all. You end up feeding more often just to maintain the same growth. That's not efficiency, that's dependency. I ran that cycle for years before realizing the soil was the weak link, not the nutrients, what ancient growers understood that we forgot. 2,000 years ago, people didn't have synthetic nitrogen or bottled phosphorus, yet they built soils that stayed productive for centuries. The trick wasn't compost alone, it was carbon structure, specifically stable, porous carbon combined with mineral ash and biological inputs. The most famous example is terra preta, but the principle shows up everywhere ancient agriculture lasted. They weren't feeding plants. They were building nutrient banks inside the soil. Plants don't need constant feeding if the soil can hold, exchange, and buffer nutrients. Stable carbon acts like a battery. It absorbs nutrients when they're abundant and releases them slowly when roots demand them. Modern fertilizer dumps nutrients all at once. Carbon-based soil systems regulate them. When I added stable carbon to my beds, fertilizer response changed completely. Lower doses produce stronger growth because nutrients stopped leaching or volatilizing. What this looks like in a real backyard garden. In a small garden bed, I incorporated crushed charcoal, properly conditioned, not raw, at about 5 to 10% by volume in the top 25 centimeters of soil. For a standard raised bed, that's roughly 1 20-liter bucket of carbon for every 200 liters of soil. I charged it with diluted urine at about 1 to 10 with water, plus wood ash at no more than 1 cup per square meter to avoid alkalinity spikes. Within 1 season, water retention improved, root depth increased, and nitrogen demand dropped noticeably. Why raw charcoal fails and gives biochar a bad reputation. Uncharged carbon steals nutrients at first. That's where people mess this up. They dump biochar into soil and wonder why plants yellow. Ancient growers never did that. When I skipped that step early on, growth stalled. Once I started charging carbon properly, plants responded immediately and stayed stable even under stress. How raised beds benefit even more than in-ground soil. Raised beds exaggerate nutrient loss because they drain faster. Carbon fixes that. In my raised beds, adding charged carbon reduced fertilizer frequency by nearly half. Soil stayed loose without collapsing into dust. During heat waves, root zones stayed cooler and moist longer. Tomatoes in carbon-amended beds held fruit when neighboring beds dropped blossoms under the same conditions. Why this still works in hydroponic and semi-hydro systems. Pure hydro doesn't use soil, but nutrient buffering still matters. I've added carbon-filled baskets beneath root zones in recirculating systems separate from direct root contact. The carbon adsorbs excess nutrients, stabilizes EC swings, and reduces toxicity when something goes wrong. It doesn't replace nutrients in hydro, but it smooths mistakes. The common myth that compost alone can do this job. Compost feeds biology, but it decomposes. Once it's gone, so is the structure. Carbon stays, compost plus carbon is powerful, compost without carbon is temporary. When I stopped relying on compost-only beds, soil stopped collapsing between seasons. That's when yields became predictable instead of luck-based. Why fertilizer companies don't talk about this? You don't need to buy fertilizer constantly if your soil holds nutrients. Carbon-based soil systems reduce dependency, not just cost. This isn't conspiracy, it's economics. The solution that lasts the longest is rarely the one sold the loudest. How to apply this without wrecking your soil balance? Start small. Add charged carbon to one bed or one plant row. Keep application under 10% by volume. Watch pH if you use ash. Stay patient. This isn't a quick green-up trick. It's a system shift. The payoff shows up in reduced inputs, deeper roots, and stress resistance, not just leaf color. Once soil becomes a nutrient reservoir instead of a sieve, fertilizer becomes a supplement instead of a crutch. I now feed less often, at lower strength, and get better results. Plants don't surge and crash. They grow steadily. Flavor improves. What convinced me this wasn't just historical nostalgia. I tested this side by side with modern fertilizers, same crops, same light, same water. The carbon-amended systems didn't always look flashy early, but they always won by mid-season. Less stress, fewer deficiencies, and better recovery from mistakes. Over time, that matters more than fast starts. Modern fertilizer is powerful but fragile. It only works if everything else is perfect. Carbon-based soil systems are forgiving. They store, buffer, and protect nutrients from loss. That's why ancient soils lasted centuries, and why this approach still works in modern gardens, raised beds, and controlled systems. If this kind of practical, tested knowledge helps you grow better food with fewer inputs, subscribe to the Farm Logic channel and share this video with someone who's tired of feeding plants instead of building soil. Better harvests don't come from stronger fertilizer, they come from smarter foundations.